Hello and welcome to Understanding Emotions. My name is Sankalp. It's been a while since I've did a solo episode. In this episode, I'm going to talk about supplements. I'm going to talk about the supplements that I take. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor. I don't want you to follow me because I do it, but I'm going to just walk you through some of the thought processes so that you can think about it and consult your medical professional if needed. Ultimately, health is very important. Some people go like, look, Sankalp, this is about emotions. This podcast is supposed to be about emotions. Why are you talking about health? Like, what does health have to do with it? And somewhere around the last 3 or 4 years, I realized that there is a cap to how much good mental health you can have if you do not focus on your physical health. In other words, what you eat, the way you exercise, or the fact that you exercise rather, how you move or the fact that you move, the movement, the activity, the nutrition, the sleep that you get, all of that has a drastic impact on your mental health, and it's the foundation of mental health. So I could be sitting here talking about advanced mindsets and therapy and healing and trauma, but really if you haven't had a good night's sleep, all of that is more or less worthless. Now, of course, there are things you can do like meditation that will help you recover from bad night's sleep and so on and so forth. So that I'm not saying it's a done deal, but if you really want to be mentally healthy, if we really want to truly understand emotions and master our emotions and feel good within ourselves, there is no escaping health. Now, with the conversation of health, I am going to talk about supplements, but the conversation of health should begin with the basics of sleep, exercise, nutrition, social connection. Those are, I think, the core foundations of health. And I'm not going to go deeper on the other parts because I had a podcast recently recorded with Dr. Sanchit Turaga, and he is a medical doctor. He knows a lot about these things, and he has worked with patients in the UK's NHS. So if you want to know more about the basics of the fundamentals of sleep and exercise and nutrition and why they are so important, then I refer you to that conversation. In this episode, what I'm doing is a bit more casual. It's a bit more like having a conversation with you. And in this conversation, what I want to share is just what I am doing. And I'm just, it's just to go perhaps over my thought process in case that is helpful. But more than anything else, I just want this to be inspirational so that you can think more a bit about health. I'm not saying you should do everything that I do. I'm not even qualified to say that. Not a medical professional once again, but it's just something that hopefully will help you think a bit about health and help you stay a bit more healthy and a bit more active. Taking back to supplements. So I think with supplements, the first thing I think about is what's normally called as foundational supplements, like a foundational nutritional category. And I think the core supplement I take for that is a multivitamin. Now I'm going to talk a bit more detail than this just being a multivitamin. This specific one is what's called Heights Vital. And I've been taking this for a really long time, like maybe 3 years or so. And the core of it, the reason why I like this particular brand as much, and this is not sponsored, there's nothing, I'm not particularly saying you should buy this, buy anything else that has the same or similar composition. But the focus of this brand has been on brain health, and there are a few things that stand out to me in this, apart from your regular B vitamins and vitamin D, which you should absolutely have, which this does have. And the extra few things are omega-3s, EPA and DHA, which I don't understand necessarily what it means, but I know that it's good for my brain. There is what's called anthocyanins, which is the compounds in blueberries, which is good for your brain health as well. And this has all of that. So again, I don't necessarily think you should take all of it, but think of the foundations as your regular B vitamins. I'm veggie, so I don't necessarily get a lot of B vitamins in my diet, which is a good to have. I live in the northern hemisphere in the UK, which means sunlight is rare. Although these days we have been enjoying some beautiful, bright, sunny days. So I take Heights and I take a foundational supplement. So if you were to tell me like, look, Sankalp, this is something I want to start. I want to start thinking about supplementation, not because my diet is not good, because if that's the case, we should fix that first, but because it's hard to get everything every single day, and I would be the first one to say I don't get it. So to get sort of this backup nutrition thing going, like a base covered, I take a foundational supplement, and for me it's the Vital, but it could be something else. Another supplement that I do have in my fridge in this category is Athletic Greens. Now this is again a sponsor to many of the podcasts. I have no commercial relationship with these guys and with any of the brands or supplements that I'm going to discuss today. But Athletic Greens also has all of the core B vitamins. It has a lot of like mixture of like, I don't know, like the green stuff. They have a lot of digestive enzymes. They have probiotics in it. But they do not have the vitamin D and they do not have the omega-3s, which you will have to get separately. So when thinking of foundations, I would encourage you to think of B vitamins. I would encourage you to think of vitamin D, and I would encourage you to think about omega-3s. Now I know classically omega-3s aren't classified as foundational, but I've taken them long enough and together with the foundationals enough for me to consider them as one thing. So if you are starting out, that's the first decision you have to make about supplements. I would go ahead with a foundational supplement depending on the costs and the price you're willing to pay for this. You can either go with a supermarket supplement, or you could go with something like Heights, which is slightly expensive than a supermarket one, I would say. And the most expensive one is Athletic Greens. I take Athletic Greens when I've had a particularly hard day, and by hard I mean I've worked out quite extensively, or I've hit a PR and I feel this pump going, and I feel exhausted. And that is when I supplement the supplement, I suppose, by taking Athletic Greens at night before sleeping. I find that it helps me sleep better. I don't know why exactly. Maybe it's because it has some amount of ashwagandha, which is known to be a cortisol modulator. And ashwagandha is going to make an appearance soon when we discuss some sports supplements. Now, the second most important supplement in my protocol, so to speak, is creatine. And this is a sports supplement. So if you are going to the gym, if you are lifting, if you are doing any amount of significant cardiovascular thing, especially if it relates to fast movements, like for example sprinting or jumping, or you're doing a sport like football, which involves you to sprint for a certain amount of time, or ultimate frisbee, which was my sport of choice back in the day, or so anything that requires like quick agile movements, including lifting, like pressing and pulling and all of that thing, creatine is great. Creatine is one of the most studied sports supplement, and the reason for that, well, I don't know the reason why it's the most studied, but it's probably because it works. And the way it works is by replenishing what's called phosphocreatine levels in your muscles. Now again, the limits of my knowledge are very limited in this area, but what I understand is it's the easiest source of energy that you have access to. So for example, the food you eat, it takes a while to digest, get converted into glucose, ATP, and so on, whereas creatine has a bit of a short circuit to that ATP circuit, or is one of the pathways which is faster. And therefore, when you do these intense movements, the first set of energy that you're burning from is from your phosphocreatine system. And so creatine just keeps those levels replenished. It keeps them full, and you will, at least I feel a little bit of like a little bit of an extra energy, especially in the starting of my sets when I have had creatine on. Now, I think the way creatine works is that you have to replenish the levels, so it does take some time for those levels to come up. Some people advocate for taking like a loading dose in the beginning. I haven't. I just started with a regular 3 gram, 4 gram dose. I'm a shorter guy, and works a little bit in the gym and keeps me going for a little bit longer and keeps me performing for a bit longer. Now, the next supplement that I take almost every day, if not every day without fail, is NMN. Now, this is a bit controversial, let's just say, because the reason why NMN got very popular with the world was because it was thought to be as a longevity drug. Like taking NMN would somehow impact longevity, make you live longer and decrease your mortality rates and so on. And as far as I understand, the research that has come out in the recent past has challenged that notion, and it's certainly not clear cut if it has implications in longevity. But what it certainly does have implications in is energy, because similar to, again, this ATP system, I believe there's something called as NAD, again, not an expert, which is a precursor to ATP, and NMN is a precursor to NAD. So the question is, how do you get your NAD levels higher? And there are various ways you can do it, including just taking direct IV drips of NAD. I do take NMN based on the literature I have read and some studies I have read, but there's also another thing called as NR, which is also a precursor to NAD. So if you are interested in this area of energy / maybe longevity, then NMN might be something that you should consider first. There are some other compounds in the longevity literature like resveratrol, which have, I think, been thoroughly challenged, if not debunked. And I would not recommend at this point to take resveratrol. Of course, again, I'm just a psychology student. I don't necessarily understand these things in detail. So obviously consult your doctors. But I think NMN does help with energy. I've definitely felt a little bit of an energy boost with it. And it might be anecdotal. I felt I'm getting a little less cold, like the common cold. But might be anecdotal, might just be good luck, and I'm not necessarily socializing as much these days because I'm focusing on my thesis. So it might be because of that, but NMN, it's definitely worth trying and worth reading up about. It's a bit more on the experimental category than the other foundational stuff that I discussed, but it is an option. Okay, so the next quote-unquote supplement I'm going to describe is a retinoid. Now, retinoids are for the skin, and therefore the supplement was in double quotes. And so I applied this to my face every night before sleeping, and I've been doing it for a couple of years, and it has absolutely completely solved any acne that I had. Now, I did not have a lot of acne anyway, like just some maybe spots on my forehead here and there, but it has really cleaned up my skin completely. And now, just like creatine is a very well-studied sports supplement, I understand that retinoids are a very well-studied dermatology drug. Now, the reason I say drug is twofold. One, because it is a drug, but two, the second reason being it is a prescription drug, which means you cannot get this just by going on the counter. What you can get when you go to the counter is what's called retinol, which is like a weaker version of this. But I, again, from the understanding that I have about skin health and keeping the longevity in the skin, so keeping it wrinkle-free, there are a few compounds that are important, and retinoids can be or are one of them. And a lot of dermatologists around me have recommended it, which is why I tried it, and it certainly has had good results on my skin. So I do apply it topically every day to my facial skin. And hopefully you find it awesome and beautiful and shiny and attractive. Right. I must say at this point that I'm not mentioning some of the basic things about skincare like sunscreen and moisturizers and so on, and I'm just assuming you know all of that. I'm not gonna go into that in detail, but I do the basics of putting on a sunscreen if the day is particularly hot and it's particularly bright rather, and I do apply a moisturizer after applying this retinoid thing every single night. All right, so now I'm going to move on to the sleep category. What do I do to optimize sleep, to ensure that I have just a little bit better sleep? And again, just like with supplements, just like diet is so important, sleep hygiene is also important. And I find that no matter what I do with supplementation, if I haven't wind it down properly, if I haven't dimmed the lights properly, I will feel not so good sleeping, even if I have all the supplements in the world. But having said that, if I do all the winding down, sleep hygiene routines well, and I do take these supplements, then I do notice that I sleep is slightly better. So what I have right in front of me is magnesium. This is one of the better studied supplements out there. It does help muscle performance, but it also helps them relax. And I think that's the reason why they help with sleep. I also have a hot chocolate, which is called Hypnos, which I don't have right now. It's depleted. It's over. And it also has, in addition to magnesium, it has L-theanine, it has apigenin, and it has some I guess it has like a passion flower extract, which ultimately leads to apigenin. But the point is, there are some drugs you can take, some supplements you can take to help your sleep a little bit. And some of the top of the stack of those supplements are magnesium. I think magnesium threonate is the form of magnesium that is best suited for sleep because it can cross the blood-brain barrier, which I know a thing or two about because of my PhD. But other than that, I don't necessarily know how apigenin or L-theanine works, but it is in the sleep category and it definitely leads to a better restful night for me if I do take them. Now, again, important to note that if I do not take them, it doesn't mean I'm not sleeping. It doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to my sleep. It all helps. But what I do notice is that if I do take them, maybe it's like 5% better, the sleep. And it can be a game changer sometimes when you're like exhausted, when I've done a late night workout, which I tend to do quite a lot. It does help me wind down and sleep a little bit better. Okay, so the next category of supplements I'm going to discuss is more on the cold category. And by cold, I mean the common cold. So I tend to have this thing of, I like to socialize, I like to go out, I like to talk to people. And a lot of this channel has been about social skills. But one occupational hazard, so to speak, of that sort of a thing is getting a lot of common colds. And I do get slightly more common colds than the average person. It's still within the average limit, I suppose, but it's on the higher side. I get like 5 or 6 colds in a year, and it has reduced a little bit in the last year or so. So from my understanding, one of the supplements that can work for it is zinc. Now, the reason why I say can, so zinc, I don't know why showing this helps at all, because ultimately these are all bottles, but I guess I'm proving it to you that I have them and I'm not just making things up. So the reason why zinc is so important, again, I don't actually know the reason, but there are some clinical studies that show that a high dose of zinc taken at the first part of the common cold, so towards the onset, if not before the onset of symptoms, when you just start feeling a little bit of a tickle, can help reduce the duration of the common cold by as much as a third or a half. And the reason why I'm a bit skeptical about this and I've been a little cautious about advising, or again, I can't advise anything, but telling you about zinc a little bit, is because it's just one study. And I guess there are a few more studies, but it is not clinical practice. So if you go to a doctor and you tell them about zinc and can I take it for a cold, they're going to be like, hey, look, I understand there are some studies that point to it that zinc is perhaps beneficial in reducing the symptom duration for common colds. There is not enough there for it to be incorporated into clinical practice. And that is, I think, the standard advice right now, is that it may work, I guess give it a try, but also be careful about taking those higher doses. So what I understand is to not take higher doses for more than 2 weeks. But again, this is something that you should absolutely consult your doctor about if you're worried about any of the side effects of taking higher doses of zinc. And I certainly did in this case. Normally, I do as well. So another potential thing that can help with the common cold is N-acetylcysteine, NAC. Now again, this compound helps by, I think, helping you clear those nasal passages better. So when I do take this, I do notice that I'm just like having much more of those post-nasal drip, that kind of thing that falls down at the back of your throat when you have a common cold. I feel that it increases that, and therefore it keeps my passages a bit more clear, a bit more fluid. It does require you to have a bunch of tissues around you, but it is also something that is in the exploratory stage. There are some studies that point at helping with symptoms, and I think it's worth exploring. It's worth having it in your arsenal. And last time I had a cold, I took both zinc and NAC, and again, it might be just a one-off anecdata thingy, but I did notice that my common cold was slightly better and I could do more even when I had it. So I was still a bit more productive than I normally am. But again, it was just N=1 and one instance. So it might just be the virus that I contracted this time was just not strong enough, or was just not as symptom inducing as some of the other ones. All right. So going ahead, I have another interesting one, and now we are pretty much in the exploratory territory. I don't think any of this thing is mandatory, but it can be helpful if you suffer from any of these problems. And this is for dental health, and this is the toothpaste, but it has what's called N-Hydroxyapatite. And what it does not have as a consequence is fluoride. So most toothpaste, when you buy from the supermarket, the reason that they help you is because they have fluoride in them. And what they help you with specifically is what's called remineralization of teeth. So what happens is when you eat a meal, when you eat some food, especially if it's sugary food, there are bacteria in your mouth that eat that food, and as a result of that process, they release acid. Now that acid sits on your mouth and erodes your teeth and leads to what we normally call as cavities. And one of the things that I've had a problem with growing up is just the arrangement of some of my teeth is not very suitable for brushing, in that the brushes don't necessarily reach them no matter how hard I try. And as a result, I've had a lot of cavities growing up. And this is an area that I've really taken seriously in the recent past, and I'm trying my best to sort of reduce those cavities a little bit, and reduce the formation of those cavities. So one of the things that fluoride can have a problem with remineralization is that it can be a bit toxic to the body. And again, the research on this is certainly not pointing in the direction of let's just stop fluoride, it's so bad, and I still use it. I alternate between this one and the other one. But just so that you know, there is an alternative out there which you may want to look into, called N-Hydroxyapatite. The reason why it's so cool is because it's made of the same N-Hydroxyapatite. Well, hydroxyapatite is the same thing as what your enamel is made of, which is the outermost layer of your tooth or teeth. And so what you're literally doing is brushing with liquid enamel in this case. The N comes from nano, which is they create nanoparticles out of it, which also has some safety concerns of its own, by the way. So again, I'm not wholeheartedly recommending it. It's just something I've been exploring to deal with cavities. Another thing I have been exploring, which I do not have right now because it did get over, and I'm trying to see if I have it. But no, I just trashed it yesterday, which is xylitol. And now xylitol, I take mints. And what it does is so I take it after every meal, and when you ingest it or when you have it in your mouth and let it dissolve, what it does is the bacteria in your mouth, which would otherwise produce acid, eat this thing, and I think they die. So it kills off the bad bacteria, and I suppose it kills the bad ones selectively. Now again, this is by my explanation, you can tell that I'm not an expert in this area. I'm just dabbling, and I just read a few articles and a few studies, and I make my decisions based on that. So this is again an area which you should study, but I believe xylitol is relatively safe. Again, consult your doctor, but I do take it and I do notice a difference, and this is something that I have to wait in the long term to see if there was any difference, whether in the next 10 years I get fewer cavities, if at all, fingers crossed. But xylitol mints is something I take after every single meal. Okay, going more on the experimental criteria, this is something I bought very recently. This is Brian Johnson's longevity mix, or the Blueprint longevity mix by Brian Johnson. Brian was a guest on the podcast. I'm quite a fan of his work with longevity and biohacking. I understand a lot of people might think that is extreme, and I certainly am not at that level that he is doing it at, but I think it's quite inspirational and it's quite educational. So this thing I take, which is a longevity mix, it has creatine in it, which I already take, but it has just 2 grams of it or 2.5 grams of it. So for me, it's not going to exceed the dose. But be careful, if you're taking already a fair amount of creatine, you may not want more. It has calcium alpha ketoglutarate, which has something to do with bones, which I don't understand in detail again, but it's a good thing. Glucosamine sulfate, which has something to do with, again, your respiratory health and immunity. So it does fall in the common cold category. And it has ashwagandha in it, which is a cortisol modulator. And by that, I mean, for the most part, if you have high cortisol, it's going to reduce it a little bit. I think I'm positive that it will increase it if it's lower, but don't quote me on that. And the idea with this, and all the other things also, I've not read everything in it, like taurine and things like that. And again, this is the idea with this, is this may help promote longevity. And the reason why I say may is because all of these studies, these are not like conclusive studies that, look, this, you just do X, Y, and Z and then you live longer. There are science in it. There are some animal studies that point in that direction. But the state of longevity research is pretty much nascent, and it's growing and it's promising. Don't get me wrong. That's why I'm trying all of these things out. But it is pretty much in its infancy. So anything you do with longevity, do think about it, and do think about uh, carefully research these things, consulting doctors and so on. All right, I'm going to discuss one final, well, actually I have two more. The first one, I'm going to reach far ahead, is this thing called glutamine. This is a sports supplement again, helps with recovery. So once you start exercising a lot, for me, I typically have 5 workouts a week of different fashion. 2 or 3 of those are in the gym with weights, and the next 2 are either taking a long hike or, well, not or, and one session of more intense, high intensity style cardio. I try to do everything that covers different heart rate ranges rather, like everything from max heart rate to more of endurance style, 60 to 70% style training. There's some other video on what training I do. But what's important when you do get pretty active is you have a high, you pay a lot of attention to recovery. And of course, the working out is not the only thing you're doing. You're probably going to work. For me, I'm doing a PhD and I do want to focus. I don't want to be like all tired and sore when I am in the PhD. So for that, I do take glutamine. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not taking it as regularly as I should be. And I think that's partly because I did not notice as big a difference when I was taking it versus I do not take it. But theoretically, it should help with muscle recovery and help you recover a little bit faster. So glutamine is also something that is pretty well studied and something that you could consider for recovery if you end up acting, if you end up tired, if you end up fatigued, either from workouts or perhaps your work that it is much more higher stress than normal. All right. So the final supplement that I have been is Rhodiola rosea. Rhodiola rosea. Now this falls in a similar category that ashwagandha falls in, which is it's a cortisol modulator. And this kind of thing can help you. It works by sort of reducing your perceived rate of exertion. So if you're doing, let's say, some activity, let's say you're doing a walk and you feel like 9 out of 10 exhausted as a result of that activity. I don't know many people who feel 9 out of 10 from a walk, but maybe that's you, maybe that's not you. But no matter what you do, and if you feel exhausted, if you feel 9 out of 10 exhausted, if you take rhodiola, chances are you may feel a little bit less exhausted. Now again, this is a bit out there. It's not necessarily the most studied supplement out there, but I do know a lot of sports physiologists use it as their supplement protocol. There is, I think, some evidence suggesting that taking rhodiola might help you with the reducing perceived rate of exertion in some activities like lifting, but it might reduce it in some others, like, for example, long distance endurance type sport. So again, do your research. Is just an idea that I'm throwing out there. That just to get your brain rolling. And I think that is pretty much it for now. Now, I must emphasize, I'm not taking every single one of these every day. The ones I do take every day are the foundational heights thingy and creatine, but I do not take anything else. I do not even ingest caffeine. I do not drink coffee. I do occasionally indulge in decaf coffee because I really like the taste of coffee, but I do not indulge in caffeine as a supplement. And I do not indulge in it as a stimulant. And as you can probably see, I'm pretty alert regardless. So that's not my jam. Mostly because it interferes with sleep, not because I have anything against caffeine. And it makes me feel a bit jittery. So I do not take caffeine. So, but the other supplements that I discuss, everything from glutamine to ashwagandha to NAC and zinc, I do not take every day, and I take them more strategically depending whether I feel fatigued, whether I'm approaching a cold, whether I am having a little bit of insomnia kind of thingy going on, and so on. So hopefully this is inspirational in some way, or at least it gets some of your brain going and helps you think a little bit more of health. If I were to accomplish anything with this episode, I just think hopefully you think a little bit more about health as a result of this episode. Now, I must say that all of this has also helped me with the emotions. I'm much more stable. Like my emotional resilience, I feel, is much more higher as a result of all of these supplements that I indulge in every now and then. But also the foundation of that has been good diet, maintaining high levels of protein when I'm exercising especially, and so on and so forth. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this got your curiosity triggered a little bit, and hope this helps. This is Sankalp signing off.